A narrow road wound its way through this patchwork, leading a minibus towards its destination, Dunfane Castle, a stone sentinel that loomed imposingly atop a rugged hill. A group of eager tourists peered from the windows, eyes wide with anticipation and a hint of superstition fostered by tales of Ireland's supernatural. Guiding the tour was Connor, a young local with an affable demeanor and an encyclopedic knowledge of Gaelic lore. As the minibus crested the hill, revealing the castle's battlements silhouetted against the sunset, Connor began recounting its storied history. "Welcome to Dunfane Castle," he intoned, his voice imbued with theatrical charm. It stood the test of time through battles and betrayals, a testament to the era when chiefs and clans ruled these lands. The tourists listened enthralled, imagining shadows of past nobility treading those ancient stones. Among them, Isabella and Jake, a couple celebrating their recent engagement, felt the castle's aura nesting deeply within their romantic reverie. The allure of Dunfane's mystical charm, whispered through generations, enhanced their anticipation. As night descended, they reached the castle, enveloped by heavy clouds obscuring the crescent moon. The group disembarked and gathered their belongings, their footsteps hushed by the gravel path leading to the entrance. Connor unlocked the tall, iron-bound doors with practiced ease, welcoming them into the somber embrace of the castle's great hall. The interior brimmed with relics. Faded banners hung beside a grand fireplace. Dust motes danced in the golden light cast by flickering lanterns. Whispers of antiquity permeated the air. It was as if the stones themselves echoed distant mysteries. Despite its seasoned grandeur, an uncertainty tinged the air, ticking faintly against the smoldering hearth. Connor directed them through a hurried exploration, painting pictures of courtly intrigue with his words. The charmed group was shown spiral staircases that wound up into drafty towers, echo-laden corridors, and portraits of long-past occupants, faces trapped in regal stares that sometimes felt uncannily alive. "Most importantly," Connor whispered conspiratorially, halting at a doorway leading to the depths below, "is the legend of the vault, hidden somewhere within these stone walls, a long-lost treasury of the chieftain, cursed and abandoned with his lineage." The night crept forward, wrapping the castle in its inky embrace. The group retired to their rooms eagerly, though piqued curiosity held Isabella awake. Wandering the torch-lit halls, she marveled at how the stones whispered stories of their own, age-old tales of ambition, betrayal, and loss as seen through conjured eyes. She found herself drawn toward a specific chamber, neglected and shadowed, featuring a portrait, different from the rest. The painted eyes followed with unnerving accuracy, a glint hinting at secrets long buried. Beneath this gaze, Isabella sensed an expansion of the narrative, one distinctly guided by the undercurrent of unsatisfied hunger. Dreaming of hidden troves and veiled histories, Isabella meandered back, but sleep remained elusive. A chill invaded her mind, the eerie feeling of being watched intermingled with the castle's intense isolation, a guardian of truths unseen. The night settled deeply across Dunfane Castle, as dreams traversed both the living and those unquiet. Suddenly the silence was shattered, an unnatural howling that rose from the depths, reverberating through stone and marrow alike, rousing remaining souls to wakefulness. Connor's voice, strained and hurried, called through the walls. "Come down, all of you. Something's stirring below." Gathering in confusion and haste, the group assembled, tremors of fear leapfrogging across their consciousness. The shadows thickened as Connor led them toward the source of the chilling wail emanating from the castle's underbelly, a passageway hidden behind brushing cobwebs, laden with secrets waiting to emerge. A sense of foreboding hung heavy. As they descended ancient steps into the cold bowels of the castle, Lamps flickered wildly in an unseen draft sweeping through the corridors as spectral figures enfolded themselves from forgotten spaces. Crossing the bound threshold, they entered a sprawling chamber, its walls eerily suffused with a glow that revealed vaults and containers, long unopened. Collections of ancient wealth lay before them, tarnished and bound with chains steeped in ages past. Yet upon looking closer, they shuddered at the figures surrounding the room. Translucent shapes, the ghostly possessors of this forsaken place, stirred, eyes filled with insatiable greed fixed upon the treasure, every covetous nuance etched with a hunger that resonantly joined their unwavering stares. In self-twined terror reverberated through those gathered. Spectres' translucent forms hovered near the tarnished wealth their souls had long been bound to guard. Isabella felt a cold rush, a prickle of dread entwined with curiosity. Their ghostly visages, twisted in eternal greed and longing, were alarmingly articulate, each movement a dialogue between the living and the departed, calling silently for reclamation. Every ghostly eye seemed locked on the group, particularly Isabella, as if seeing her not merely as an intruder, but as a potential savior. She caught the eye of the chieftain, a hollow gaze that communicated a depth of lifetimes, lost yet beseeching redemption. Though she trembled under their scrutiny, Isabella felt clarity blossom within her, a realization born of whispers that tides had shifted, and she was the key. The air grew thick with anticipation, a hypnotic symphony pulling at Isabella's consciousness. The tourists clung together, eyes wide, breaths quickened by the spectral drama unfolding. Connor, though pale, held a fervent light in his eyes, daring to believe in folklore truth given flesh. Isabella, heart pounding, stepped forward, courage woven from desperation and resolve. Her voice echoed in the chamber, encompassing more strength than felt. "What do you desire? Why linger bound to this place?" The chieftain's visage flickered as he spoke, voice like rustling leaves, carrying the gravity of ancestral tones. "Greed chained us here, lust for gold consumed our end, leaving us guardians of echoes. You, daring to ask and listen, might help us find release, a key to unshackle eternal watch." His words sparked understanding, a cursed cycle driven by avarice, needing the selflessness of the living. The treasure pulsed with binding force. Isabella recalled tales of cursed wealth, binding coveters to doom, a lesson in folly. In that moment, Isabella's fear gave way to determination. She had to exchange avarice for redemption, aiding spirits in relinquishing wealth. "Is there a way to free you?" Isabella pressed, stepping closer, the group observing with bated breath. "Yes," the chieftain replied, spectral form stabilizing, hope cresting. "A pledge, manifest through goodwill and action, gifted to the living, restoring balance disrupted by greed must be honored. Let the vault's wealth serve people, breathing life into community." Isabella nodded, feeling a righteous ceremony within her thoughts, emboldening spirit. She turned to fellow tourists, voice imbued with vulnerability and mission strength. "We can help them move on. This treasure can aid the living, revitalize Eldridge, honor legacy, and write a new chapter." Whispers turned to nods as potential for newfound purpose was realized. Envisioning Eldridge rejuvenation, they accepted their extraordinary part in a tale. Initially skeptical, tourists saw doubts transform into resolve, transcending mere spectatorship. As they began cataloging and organizing treasure for town benefit, each gesture weighed in the spiritual realm. The chieftain's kin shimmered with each act, unraveling from greed. Energy that once anchored now sparked connections, erasing chains of desire. As moonlit hours passed, tangible became ephemeral. Morning's light softly broke through openings, casting onto dissipating forms, a cascade of unity freed beyond mortality. Liberated from earthly ties, ghosts nodded gratitude to Isabella and group, dispersing like mist with dawn's kiss, lifting a film from the world, revealing life's vibrancy, air alive with new energy. Radiance filled the chamber. Isabella understood she joined something larger, a guardian stepping into history, completing her story amid vibrant past lives, liberated by shared purpose. Unified joy swept through Dunfane Castle as spectral release became tangible, a promise honored and renewed. The cycle of avarice broke, gifting rebirth tales through stones set free. Outside, air crackled with rain and redemption. A chorus of newfound affinity rose through Eldridge, echoing truth across hills. Harmony abides. As they left the castle, Isabella felt peace, knowing Spirit's release brought prosperity and solidarity. Starlight graced with wisdom, an enduring testament to courage, understanding, trust. Gentle wind whispered tales to stones, celebrating legacies embraced by life-giving hands. Though past's echoes lingered with redemption's embrace, Isabella knew she and companions secured a sanctuary within legend. Eldridge stood renewed by eternal fidelity, a victorious end to greed. In its wake rose a song, a requiem and renewal, a story for generations, binding people and spirits beyond time. Ethan Blake had always been captivated by the allure of the abandoned, of places where echoes of the past lingered long after humanity had departed. An intrepid traveler from Washington, Ethan made it his life's mission to explore sites steeped in history, where the heavy hands of time and tragedy left their marks. His exploits, captured vividly on social media, had taken him from the eerie ghost towns of the Wild West to the decaying charm of forgotten factories. Yet none captured the essence of what he sought like Chernobyl did. A modern-day Atlantis swallowed not by waves, but by radiation and regrowth. Ever since the meltdown in 1986, Chernobyl had transformed from a site of great loss to one of mysterious allure, drawing curiosity seekers like moths to a flame. Ethan arrived in the ghostly town of Pripyat in winter, the morning crisp, the air biting. A thick layer of snow covered the ground, masking the scars of the past beneath a serene white shroud. Geiger counter in hand, he was prepared for his greatest adventure yet, intent on delving deeper into the exclusion zone than any sanctioned tour could offer. As Ethan ventured through the deserted streets, the iconic Ferris wheel loomed in the distance, its rusting frame a skeletal silhouette against the pale sky. The scene was haunting in its serenity, a snapshot of a life abruptly interrupted. He wandered down Lenin Avenue, past the dilapidated swimming pools, the overgrown soccer fields, all eerily silent under nature's inexorable reclamation. While navigating this frozen tableau, Ethan noticed a narrow passageway veering away from the main route, barely discernible beneath the snow and creeping vines, an invitation from the past. Ignoring a flicker of unease, he followed it deep into the woods, the path becoming less distinct with each step. Around him, the forest whispered, a cacophony of unseen life hidden beneath the blanket of white, until finally it opened into a clearing dominated by an imposing concrete watchtower. The tower stood defiant against the encroaching wilderness, and with it came a sign, Tolkud la Personala, reserved for personnel only. Ethan's heart quickened with excitement, the undeniable allure of forbidden knowledge enticing him forward. He climbed cautiously, each step a journey through time, reaching the tower's observation platform with bated breath. There, through shattered panes of glass, he saw a figure in the woods. At first it seemed a mere shadow among shadows, but then it clarified. A man in an antiquated Soviet military uniform, face obscured by a gas mask. Every instinct screamed at him to be cautious, yet curiosity is a siren song. He raised his camera, capturing what he hoped would be proof of an unexpected encounter. But when he lowered the lens, the figure was gone, leaving only questions in its wake. Descended into a growing unease, Ethan returned to the ground, discovering that the path back seemed different, infused with a sense of being implacably wrong, a dissonant melody in the deepening silence. Trees that once bent gently now formed a claustrophobic tunnel, guiding him inexorably towards something unseen. The air grew thick as he stumbled upon an entrance nearly smothered by the earth. A bunker. What drove him to enter, Ethan couldn't say. Perhaps the same force that had drawn him here, a pull stronger than logic or fear. Torchlight cut through the dark, revealing the confines of a command center from another era. Consoles lay dormant beneath layers of dust, screens glazed with age, and the hum of technology whispered of secrets best left undisturbed. He moved deeper into the bowels of the bunker, the oppressive silence abruptly shattered by an unfamiliar roar, distinct and dissonant. It was not just sound, but cacophony, a fugue of voices and cries, each drowning the other like layers of distant conversations, and underneath it all, like a constant stream weaving through the chaos, was a single voice he knew all too well. His own voice trapped in a cycle of desperation and dread. "Help me," it begged, a tiny, keening wail. Panic surged, a predator stalking him in the dark as Ethan spun, the light skittering off walls, each more alien than the last. The entrance was gone, replaced by resolute concrete. Fear cloyed, sticky and suffocating. His mind reeled, searching for sense in the insanity. He was trapped in an echo of a past he didn't belong to, tangled within the sinews of a nightmare, brought to life by the very ground beneath him. But, driven by will or simply the erosion of clarity, he forced himself forward, deeper into the labyrinth, drawn by a terrible need to understand. There, at the heart of this mystery, a spacious chamber unfolded before him, everything bathed in an eerie, living luminescence that seemed to breathe in response to his presence. In the center stood a machine unlike anything he'd ever seen, its purpose inscrutable, its presence undeniable. Stacks of yellowed files lined the walls, folders brimming with secrets history had forgotten to share. Hesitantly, he reached for one, fingers brushing against dry, cracked paper. Ethan's name, bold as betrayal, stared back at him from the document's cover, a dossier diagramming his life in unsettling detail, events orchestrated long before his arrival. Before comprehension could take root, the ground beneath him trembled violently, as if the earth itself rejected his intrusion. The dossier scattered, pages falling like confetti in a disjointed celebration of deceit. He was thrown to the floor, his head buzzing with a montage of pastimes, the Ferris wheel turning, the radiant smile of children long since gone, the ominous presence of watchers, all watching, waiting, unyielding. Time folded, unfurling its mysteries, and Ethan found himself once more before the Ferris wheel, the masked figure watching still. Not a mere specter of imagination, but the guardian of an elaborate enigma. The gas-masked watcher was no simple remnant of further disillusionment, but a meticulously fabricated entity, ensuring secrets remained entangled within Chernobyl's embrace. The realization was staggering. His journey had been manipulated, every experience a cog in the vast clockwork of something far beyond understanding. Ethan, however unwittingly, had become both observer and observed in a dance of shadows destined to repeat. Pripyat was alive with the sinews of forgotten whispers, a guardian of lost knowledge that harnessed visitors' specters into a grand illusion of deceit and memory. Yet, in the sudden stillness that followed, the Geiger counter's unwavering silence hung around him like a cloak, signaling an impossible reality, a cleansing not of body, but of soul. Liberation came not with escape, but through acceptance of the pact formed between person and place, past and presence. Now Ethan stood again in the world of light and reality, forever altered by the consciousness of a truth greater than he could encapsulate with words or framed images. Months passed before his Instagram showed signs of life, posts no longer mere glimpses of reality frozen in time, but reflections on the unseen currents of his odyssey beneath Chernobyl's haunted gaze. In his narratives, something eternally spoken between the lines, a soft whisper on the page invited others to listen to their own echoes within the silence. Those captive voices trapped in time's chasm, waiting to tell their story, waiting to be heard.
After the funeral, the house sat still, wrapped in the melancholy of summer twilight. Emily gazed wistfully at her grandmother's old Victorian home, a place once full of life, now reduced to shadows and dust. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and something else she couldn't quite place, perhaps the poignant mix of time, age, and memory. Her grandmother, Agnes Cartwright, had left everything to Emily. The house was hers now, a sprawling testament to years of vigilant care and a place consecrated in family lore. As she pushed open the creaking front door, it parted with a sigh that resonated through the grand parlor, leading to rows of rooms cradling echoes of laughter and the eerie shade of solitude. The lawyer had mentioned one specific area in the will, a room on the second floor, locked since Agnes's passing. It contained what her grandmother had referred to as the collection. In the folds of memory, Emily recalled whispered conversations about a passion that bordered on obsession. Intrigued and a bit apprehensive, she ascended the spiral staircase that stretched under an ornate chandelier hanging above, like a frozen glow of moonlight. Reaching the second floor, she moved along the narrow corridor, pausing before an old oak door whose varnish had long since peeled. The doorknob was cool against her skin as she twisted it gently, stepping into a room brightly lit by the last slivers of a dying sun. Emily found herself surrounded by hundreds of eyes that gleamed as the light touched them. An expansive assemblage of antique dolls lining the shelves, perched on chairs, leaned into corners. Each doll was meticulously dressed, their porcelain faces captured in various expressions: serene smiles, melancholic gazes, soft smirks frozen in time. A slight shiver crawled across Emily's skin. She'd never much liked dolls, always finding them unsettling with their eerily lifelike features. Yet these dolls, once her grandmother's treasures, seemed to pulse with an energy that thrummed gently under the surface of their ceramic veneer. Amidst them, a particularly elaborate doll caught her eye, a Victorian beauty garbed in intricate lace and silk, its black eyes seeming to follow Emily as she walked around the room. A sense of unease tugged at her consciousness, a primal instinct to leave their stilted company before evening's shadow devoured the fading sun. She resisted, driven by obligation and curiosity, deciding to explore the rest of the room before nightfall. As Emily made her way towards the large window, streaked with grime, she noticed something strange. A book lay open on a small mahogany table, ancient and delicate, its pages filled with spidery script in a language tangled and obscure. A sudden chill swept across her as a whisper echoed in the stillness, imperceptibly soft yet resounding within her mind. Startled, Emily looked around, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The room was still. Innocent dolls sat motionless, harmless. Shaking off the absurdity of unease, she closed the book gently, hoping to stall any reverberation that might linger in the halcyon dusk. She left the room behind, sealing it with a heavy breath, and descended to the relative sanctuary of the living room, deciding that she needed to call her parents to share the strange tension that hovered in this house, now all too silent. The phone rang, static crackling like the slow burn of her nerves before a comforting voice on the other end cut through her loneliness. "I miss her, Dad," Emily confessed, feeling the day's weariness seeping into her bones. Her presence still feels so real here. He consoled her with gentle words, reminding her of their love and the legacy of her grandmother's passion that now carried into her keep. Emily took comfort in the thought, yet the compelling darkness upstairs seemed to grow heavier by the passing hour. As night cloaked the house in shadow, Emily settled into an armchair once claimed by her grandmother, recalling bedtime stories and the scent of lavender and sage that always lingered in her hair. The wind howled outside, a low lament that ebbed through the eaves, lulling her into restless slumber. In the hush of midnight, Emily awoke, the dim room unfamiliar and confining. She shivered, realizing the subtle silence was absent, replaced by a distinct, unnatural tinkling sound like porcelain tapping echoing somewhere beyond the foyer. Her throat tightened with an unspoken fear, her senses heightened in the shivering darkness. Compelled by a morbid curiosity and a sense of responsibility to the home entrusted to her, Emily rose, her breath shallow, as she crossed the creaking floor. With each step towards the hallway, the noise grew faintly louder, more organized, an eerie lull spanning between breaths of old walls and floorboards pressing back onto themselves. The stairs beckoned, and in hesitant increments she ascended once more. Yet just as she reached the landing, the tapping ceased, leaving only the vibrating tension in her body and the haunting memory of her grandmother's voice whispering the enduring refrain. "Keep them safe, Emily. They are a part of us." The disquiet had not subsided by morning, and Emily found herself drifting through the house, tentative yet unable to draw away. Whenever she passed the closed door on the second floor, a quiver of unanswered voices seemed to call softly from within. Coffee did little to sober her senses, and the regular rhythm of the day failed to dispel the chill from her bones. Determined to confront whatever unease lay nested upstairs, Emily steeled herself and once more climbed the stairwell. Sunbeams pierced dust-laden rooms, but the corridor she entered felt separate, a faintly oppressive chill lingering in the air. She hesitated, her hand poised against the oak door that guarded her grandmother's collection. Breathing deeply, she entered. The dolls were still there as silent sentinels, expressions ambiguously serene. Yet on each, Emily sensed an evolution, an ageless awareness that transcended the room's musty staleness. The air held an iridescent quality, as if it shimmered beneath the surface, a waking elegance veiled in shadowed deceit. The elaborate doll she first noticed was prominently placed on a shelf directly opposite her entrance. Something about its eyes remained unsettling, following Emily's every movement in the room with intent scrutiny. As she drew near, the feeling of being intensely watched tugged at her mind and refused to depart. "I'm not imagining this," she whispered, recalling her grandmother's voice, which lingered as a soft reminder to trust her instincts, even as reality appeared blurred by ancestral mystery. The book she'd seen before lay closed on the table, its surface glistening with the haze of forgotten lore. Driven by a sense of urgency and intuition, Emily lifted the cover, pinching the brittle edges of pages used to weave the mystic. Lineages inked in quietude, chanting silent stories of memory and longing. A sudden draft swept the room, and the dolls shifted ever so slightly, like half-forgotten dreams slumbering at the corner of one's eyes. Whispers arose, mingling in a cacophony of murmurs as Emily glanced about, stricken by a dawning comprehension of their soulless unity. She stepped back, the quiet knowledge of intention dawning like fragmented clouds, reflecting celestial bodies. Her perspective shifted. In those moments, their faces moved, not physically but consciously, echoing an uncanny aliveness through the immobility. Understanding danced elusively before her, until trembling with an unfamiliar intensity, her focus rested solely on them, and the unyielding power they obediently radiated. Suddenly, Emily felt enveloped by a memory, not her own, a fragment of a time shared and a bond unseen. Her grandmother, kneeling before the vast assembly of dolls, speaking softly with the same familial cadence. A language of kinship they embraced, communicating in threads beyond mortal reckoning. The Victorian doll's eyes gleamed, not with malice, but awareness, a vast opening to the expanse that entwined yesterday's stories with today's reality. Driven by inherited comprehension, Emily realized her purpose now entwined irrevocably with theirs. They sought her grandmother's essence, a spiritual tether to a life they'd once guided. Instinct pervaded doubt. Emily discarded fear, welcoming fulfillment long sealed in vacuous silence. A courage that resonated with her grandmother surged through her veins, transforming the room's chilling expanse into one of warmth and light. Drawing forth sincerity from within, Emily pledged aloud, "I will safeguard you, as she did. You are not alone." At her words, the atmosphere lifted, shadows retreating peacefully into the afternoon's luminous embrace. Wisdom acknowledged in their gracious nods, a silent acknowledgement from porcelain-formed kindred souls. The unease that once overshadowed faded to evoke the comforting embrace of guardian presences. Beyond the confines of the old Victorian house, sunlight streamed in wide open beams, inviting spectres of past and present together into Emily's outspread arms. She stood, feeling not as curator, but as an integral part of a complicated weave spanning generations, understanding instinctively that the ties once thought ethereal were profoundly real and unbreakable. Emily left the room, no longer prey to dread, but bound by newfound embrace of ancestry. Echoing the rhythmic, heart-touching murmurs of bond eternal, the dolls remained silent sentinels, protectors in memory's ethereal dance, brilliantly alive in the whispers of porcelain eternity.
The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden ribbons of light through the dense canopy as 5 friends, Thomas, Mia, Ethan, Lily, and Jake, made their way into the heart of the forest. The air was thick with the earthy scent of moss and decaying leaves, and the sounds of wildlife echoed mysteriously around them. They had just celebrated their high school graduation, buzzing with the thrill of newfound independence and the blossom of young love. Thomas and Mia led the pack, their hands interlocked, whispering promises only those caught in the throes of first love could make. It was Mia's idea to explore the restricted area deep within the forest. Stories about the site, a once government-used radar station long since abandoned, were laden with chilling lore. Among the tales spun over campfires was one that stood out, a game that played you instead of the other way around, a sinister version of the innocent childhood game, Scissor, Paper, Rocks. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" Lily asked, adjusting her backpack nervously as they reached the rusted gate, marking the boundary into the forbidden zone. Her voice trembled slightly, masking a deeper-seated fear of the unknown. "Oh, come on, it's just a game," Ethan replied, his tone more confident than he felt inside. "Besides, it's probably some urban legend to keep kids like us out." His chuckle was nervous, trying to convince himself as much as Lily. The group squeezed through a gap in the fence, its metal jaws wiped clean by decades of rust and neglect. Scratches of old "keep out" signs dangled precariously, their warnings long forgotten. Venturing deeper, the air seemed to grow colder despite the residual warmth of the day. The path was treacherous, roots snaking across the trail like skeletal fingers reaching out to snare the unwary. The forest grew denser, swallowing the sun and bathing the world in a green gloom. They stumbled upon a clearing where wildflowers grew in unruly clusters around the dilapidated structure. The radar dish, toppled and encrusted with vines, lay like a dead giant. Close by, someone had erected a stone circle embedded in the earth, with cryptic symbols carved into its surface, an altar to the mysterious game. The atmosphere was eerie, as if the very ground hummed with unsung energy. "I dare you all to play," Jake announced, his bravado masking the chill running up his spine. A dim light flickered in his eyes, one part excitement, two parts fear. The prospect of challenging the legend thrilled him, yet the chilling environment gnawed gently at the edges of his courage. With hesitant agreement, the five friends circled the stones and clasped their hands. The rules, found etched upon a nearby plaque, half buried under leaves, were simple yet woven with ominous undertones. To play the game, players must call out their choice simultaneously. But be warned, playing sometimes came with unforeseen consequences. As they chanted, the sky roiled with clouds, casting the clearing into an early dusk. The trees cast long, stretching shadows that seemed to dance with an otherworldly animation. The forest seemed to hold its breath, an uncanny silence settling over the landscape. Shadows lengthened, rising and twisting like living things among the trees, watching, waiting. "Scissor, paper, rocks!" they shouted into the twilight. An unexpected wind rushed through the clearing, extinguishing the remaining daylight. The force of it was as if 1,000 whispers collided, creating a symphony of sound that echoed through the clearing. A silence fell, heavy, absolute, pregnant with possibilities and dread. The winner, Ethan with paper, smirked in the dimness. "See? Nothing to it." But his laughter was cut short as the earth trembled beneath their feet. The symbols on the rocks glowed with an eerie luminescence, pulsating rhythmically as if in time with a heartbeat deep below the earth. And then, nothing. Only the calls of distant night birds echoed through the trees. The world resumed its deceptive calm. "Probably just a trick of the light," Thomas muttered, though his voice wavered, betraying his unease. Minutes passed, and slowly, unease settled over the friends like mist rising from the forest floor. They decided to leave, assured they'd survived the ordeal unscathed. Yet, as they walked away from the clearing, the woods echoed with a whisper, a distorted refrain murmuring the game's choices. The deeper they went into the forest, the stronger the feeling that they were not alone. The path out was different, twisted impossibly as if the forest itself conspired to keep its secrets hidden. Mia glanced about, realizing with growing panic that they were lost. The trees, once familiar, now seemed to conspire against them, branches nodding into sinister shapes as they blocked the sky. Noises followed them, cracking twigs, distant rustles. It felt as if unseen eyes watched their every move. When they finally paused to regroup, Jake counted heads, a look of confusion and horror washing over his face. "Where's Ethan?" His voice cracked, a mere whisper swallowed by the forest. The friends looked around frantically, calling his name. But their voices fell flat, eaten by the unnatural quiet. Shadows moved silently at the corners of their eyes. In the encroaching darkness, a shadow emerged. It was Ethan, but something had changed. His stance and eyes were vacant, hollow of the life they once brimmed with. Ethan," Lily stammered, reaching out tentatively. Her hand almost touched him when the air around him seemed to shift. He opened his mouth, but instead of words, a cacophony of cries emanated, a language of anguish and despair. His form shifted, flickering between reality and some other terrifying form. The forest around them trembled anew, the trees seemingly alive with ancient breath and terrible knowing. Realization set in, Whatever specter controlled the game had claimed Ethan. The shadows themselves seemed to clutch at the remaining friends, tendrils weaving through the air with a life of their own. An oppressive pressure squeezed the air around them. Retreating, they stumbled back towards the circle, horror enveloping their senses. "We have to finish the game," whispered Mia, the realization dawning that the rules needed fulfilling for release. Her words were a lifeline, fragile yet the only course they knew to take. Desperation fueled them as they recreated the circle, hands clasped once more. With shaking voices, they repeated the chant. "Scissor, paper, rocks!" Scissors claimed victory. Shadows enveloped Lily, her scream fatally brief as the forest consumed her. There was no grandeur in their loss, only cold, indifferent finality. The forest was impassive, systematically reclaiming its due. Thomas, Mia, and Jake were paralyzed with terror, barely grasping the dawning realization. The game sought its play to completion, claiming its contestants unless severed by fate's hand. The stone circle pulsed with energy, crackling as reality and myth merged. Ghostly forms shimmered at the edge of the circle, flickering in and out of focus, spectators from another world drawn to this macabre ritual. Mist floated in between them, whispering forgotten secrets. With ragged breath and one last stand, the trio completed the fateful cycle, each praying silently. Time stammered, then halted as their simultaneous cries, "Rocks!" reverberated against the stones. In that instant, the shadows recoiled, and Ethan was released from their malevolent grip. He slumped forward out of the shadow's hold, but forever changed, his eyes bearing witness to horrors untold. The friends collapsed into each other's arms, the clearing now seemingly stripped of its malice. The forest sighed, releasing its hold. With dawn's light creeping through the trees, reality felt fragile, unraveling at the edges of sanity. Their collective breaths were harmonized by an unspoken bond of survival and loss. They rose, unable to fully comprehend the passage of time, their hearts still racing from the onslaught of the supernatural. The path out, once treacherous, was clear, as if the woods themselves were eager to be rid of them. Emerging from the forest, the sunrise greeted them, timid and pale, as if it too had weathered the night's trial. The survivors limped into the open, broken by what they endured, knowing the forest would forever whisper of their ill-fated game, a warning to the daring and the foolish alike. Behind them, the stone circle lay quietly, awaiting the return of new voices, new lives drawn into its eternal game, a mosaic of scissor, paper, and rocks. The air was stilled again, the mystical place resuming its guise of indifferent serenity.
October's crisp air clung to the neighbourhood as darkness tucked Eldergrove Lane beneath its expansive cloak. The wind danced through brittle leaves, gently persuading them to join its nocturnal symphony. Inside one quaint lantern-lit house, Sarah Dennison settled on her couch with popcorn and a bottle of wine, prepared for her yearly Halloween ritual. A devout horror movie fanatic, Sarah reserved this night to indulge in back-to-back screenings of cinematic scares. Friends often teased her about watching these films alone, especially on Halloween. But she knew the thrill was incomparably sweet when tasted in solitude. The opening credits of The Haunting unfurled across the television, eerie strains threading through her cozy living room like whispered incantations. The glow of jack-o'-lanterns on the porch flickered against fragile glass window panes, their monstrous grins watching an unseen world beyond. 30 minutes into the film, the story's tension mirrored the mounting suspense within the room. Just as unseen terror gripped the characters on screen, Sarah was startled by a sudden, deliberate knock at her door. She paused the film, her heart quickening against the abruptness of the interruption. Surely it was just a late trick-or-treater, she thought, even though it was shortly past 9, a bit late for little ghouls and goblins. Nevertheless, Sarah rose, thankful for the momentary escape from cinematic terror. Peering through the peephole, however, she saw nothing but the soft glow of streetlights misting through the autumn air. Curiosity laced with caution compelled her to crack the front door open, the chain latch securely in place. "Hello?" she called into the night, her breath a thin wisp on the chilled breeze. Silence answered, swallowing her inquiry into the depths of its timeless swirl. Closing the door, she chuckled lightly to herself, a trick of the wind, no doubt. Returning to her seat, Sarah pressed play, allowing herself to be drawn back into the unfolding nightmare on screen. But another knock, identical and deliberate, echoed before the next scene could begin, shaking her composure. Flickering annoyance intertwined with skepticism as she checked the peephole again. Nothing. Intrigued and a touch emboldened by wine's comforting fog, Sarah stepped onto the porch this time, scanning the immediate surroundings. The quiet neighborhood lay unperturbed, a cocoon of stillness under the autumnal night sky. There were no visible specters, no rustling children sneaking treats or tricks. Instinctively retreating inside, her calm slowly unraveling, Sarah wondered if she was falling prey to Halloween's eternal mischief. A strange night summoning strange occurrences. She nestled back into her sanctuary, determined to lose herself in fictional horrors rather than brooding over intangible fears. An uneasy peace settled around her as the movie reached a crescendo, yet no sooner had she begun to relax when a louder, more insistent knock reverberated through the room, leaving her no choice but to confront it once more. Confusion turned to apprehension as she checked the door again, hesitating longer this time. She swung it open, stepping out onto the porch with equal parts caution and irritation. "Someone there," she pressed, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. She heard it then, a soft shuffling movement from behind the frosted bushes bordering the porch, shadows twisted in the faint glow, transforming mundane shapes into grotesque specters. "Who's there?" Sarah's voice wobbled. Less a command, more a plea. The bushes rustled lightly, whispering secrets she preferred remained veiled. Then, the moment shattered. From the shadows erupted a figure, diving past her into the house with alarming agility. Sarah stumbled back, heart leaping into her throat as she recoiled from the abrupt invasion. Both her survival instinct and adrenaline merged, pushing her to rush inside. It was her only brother Jake, eyes brimming with mirth, doubled over in laughter that echoed through the space where silence once thrived. "Gotcha!" he wheezed, shoulders rocking with delight, mirroring the childish amusement they shared when they were children. "Oh my God, Jake!" Sarah gasped, fuming yet relieved, hands on her hips, but unable to deny the swell of sibling affection. "You scared me senseless, it's not funny." He composed himself, brushing off her scolding with a jesting grin. "I knocked earlier and no answer. Thought you might be, too absorbed. So, I decided to have some fun." Sarah rolled her eyes, breath easing now the surprise had passed. "Next time, just text instead of playing Phantom," she scolded lightly, heartbeats gradually finding rhythm. Tension released into familial banter. Jake joined her on the couch, invitingly spreading the popcorn bowl between them and sharing in her Halloween tradition. Normalcy reclaimed the room, the earlier terror recast in softer hues as laughter took root. Outside, the wind's low moan continued tracing paths around Eldergrove Lane, wrapping the house in autumn's transient tapestry, unaware of the shifting perceptions within. The warmth of shared company renewed the evening, even as shadows continued to weave their dance across Eldergrove Lane, taunting boundaries of the familiar. As sibling camaraderie settled over the television's faint glow, Sarah and Jake exchanged musings about legendary horror stories and childhood phobias, entwined in nostalgia. The wind hummed gently like a distant lullaby, coursing through cracks and into the cozy haven. Time passed without distinction until Jake suggested a switch to something lighter. A comedy, perhaps, to dissolve the dark shroud Halloween traditionally draped. Sarah agreed, glad to shift away from tension, her mind still lingering on the earlier fear. Just as Jake fetched his phone to recommend a film, a new knock, bold and intrusive, riddled through the door, a fourth herald intruding on their laughter. "What did you order, pizza or something?" Sarah quipped to Jake, half expectant. "I didn't, no," Jake shrugged, rising to answer the insistent call. Concern shaded Sarah's amusement, a fraction of the earlier chill creeping back. She trailed behind Jake as he opened the door wide, revealing heavy night pressed against the threshold. No sooner had he blinked at the vacancy when it filled with an enveloping figure, all cloaked in darkness, hulking under the now ebbing streetlight, a ghost of primal terror unequal to any past haunt. Panic drew a stranglehold on her senses. Fight or flight grappled within her instinctive core. Yet Jake, still riding the thrill of surprise, stepped back, unaware of the shadow looming like night birthed from elder tales. The figure moved with horrifying deliberation. Its reach extended and seized Jake with powerful vice-like grips, dragging him from safety, resolving veil to flesh, nightmare to reality. "Jake!" Sarah's scream ripped through the shrouded space, her feet frozen on terror-locked tiles. She lunged to the door, heart racing with desperation. Visible for only portions was something more grotesque than mask or taxidermist art. A conglomeration of stone-grey skin stretched impossibly over elongated bone. She grabbed Jake's arm in futile effort, despair filling her eyes as the creature's immutable resolve pulled him beyond the doorway. Into the quagmire of moon-bathed reality, it dragged him swift. Sudden synapses cut through Sarah's frenzied resistance. A spark! She reached with fierce determination, swung the iron lamp from the entrance table and shattered it down. The infernal embrace broke momentarily, enough to pull Jake backwards within security's threshold. It roared then. A haunting guttural noise splintering silence, resonant terror woven into sound. Then, faced with altered equilibrium, it vanished into the night, consumed by the halo's edge. Breath returned to normal slowly when daylight surrendered Eldergrove's horror to memory revised, the night's uncertainty a silent story shared between them. Both siblings sat there absorbing shifting moments. Only then did Sarah's mind align. What had seemed Phantom's prank became the twist revealing external truth. Beyond Door had momentarily been the join point where myth breached reality's fragile shell, something hungering worse than spectres familiar. Evoked logic danced unwelcome to revel colours beneath artifice granted by fear. What haunted wasn't merely chance or thrill faltered in October's delight, it dwelled within shadows woven permanent to spirit. For as daylight broke Halloween's nightmare into slumber, far removed across Eldergrove Lane nestled shadows overseen. Somewhere nearby, heartbeats throbbed louder than time remembered, cocooned amidst atmosphere. The finality resided in perceptive realization, a pledge of awareness, gentle cocooned braced, that somewhere out there, echoing forgotten whispers beyond veil stretched between worlds, the entity still waited discreet and genuine, anticipating what midday presumed safe, eternal. Where I once uncovered one truth transient, another multitude lay upon pathways, unknowns and phantasms twisted scarred, and those misshapen figures waited baited beneath colour's sheen, watching during presence vibrant around cathedral autumn, their call yet incomplete, a skin unbound, misunderstood. In those hours absolved from dream to light, Sarah understood their world found rebirth continually, untamed spectre upon halls beyond known. Within, the truth that faded with each heartbeat of daytime was removed from twisted destiny forsaken.
The small town of Crestwood was the kind of place where life moved in slow, familiar patterns, where the seasons left their gentle mark on the people and the landscape. Nestled amidst hushed forests and rolling fields, its calm facade belied a deep undercurrent of unease. For Crestwood was a town haunted by the memory of a monster whose shadow had long darkened its history, a serial killer known only by the chilling moniker, the Harvest Man. The Harvest Man had terrorized Crestwood years ago, preying upon the unsuspecting in a brutal spree that left 5 people dead, and the community scarred. The killer was cunning, eluding capture at every turn, slipping through the fingers of justice like a phantom of malevolence. Disappearances became tragic discoveries, each more horrid than the last, until one day they abruptly ceased. The harvestman vanished without a trace, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. Generations passed, and the stories, once vivid with horror, dulled to whispers, a part of Crestwood's lore told only to frighten children around campfires. But sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and legends have a way of clawing back into the light. Cal Weaver had arrived in Crestwood seeking refuge from the cacophony of city life. A writer by trade, he yearned for the quiet contemplation that only isolation could bring. He rented a quaint cabin on the outskirts of town, tucked away at the edge of a dense woodland. There he hoped to find inspiration, or at the very least, a measure of peace to drown out the lingering echoes of his own troubled past. The townsfolk were polite yet distant, their friendliness scraping against an invisible barrier of mistrust reserved for outsiders. Cal didn't mind. He preferred solitude, finding comfort in the company of his thoughts. His days were spent wandering the woods, collecting fragments of stories from the landscape's subtle whispers. It was on such a solitary walk that he stumbled upon an odd mound of stones, carefully arranged in a rough circle deep in the forest. Intrigued, he paused to examine them, running his fingers along the moss-covered surface. The stones seemed unnaturally cold, and Cal felt a chill prickle the back of his neck. As he straightened, he sensed a shift, as though the trees themselves were absorbing his presence. The wind sighed through the branches, carrying a sound that could almost be mistaken for distant, mournful laughter. Troubled, Cal returned to his cabin, where he penned notes with feverish intensity, channeling the day's experience into prose. That night he dreamt of shadowy figures moving through the trees, their faces obscured, their eyes glinting in the moonlight like polished stone. The dreams persisted, growing more vivid with each passing night. Each one brought Cal closer to something intangible. Sometimes he saw a face, sometimes heard a voice, as though the figures were trying to communicate. He awoke each morning with a sense of looming expectation, the weight of it pressing down, ripe with unspoken portent. As the days blended into each other, Cal began to notice subtle changes both within and without. The cabin creaked and groaned at odd hours, as if settling into discontent. Shadows lingered longer than seemed natural, pooling in corners and stretching up walls with strange inertia. Meanwhile, Crestwood prepared for its annual fall festival, a tradition meant to celebrate the harvest and community, even as it warded off the ghosts of its darker history. Cal, driven by restless curiosity, attended. The townsfolk gathered in the square, their laughter battling against the chill in the air. Stalls brimmed with crafts and treats, and the scent of cider mingled with the crisp autumn breeze. Yet, beneath the surface there was tension, a watchful air that hung over festivities. As Cal wandered through the throngs, he caught snippets of conversation, half-hushed and fearful. Mentions of disappearances, of omens and bad luck. Some spoke of restless spirits. A woman with steel-gray hair and eyes sharp as flint caught Cal's arm, her grip unexpectedly strong. "The forest remembers," she said, her voice a rasp that dug into his bones. "Beware the places where the light doesn't reach." Her words followed Cal into the twilight hours, haunting his steps back to the cabin. That night sleep came fitfully, stealing away in fragmented moments as dreams crowded in. In the darkness his mind's eye conjured the stone circle, now more vivid than before. He could feel the presence of others around him, an audience unseen. Faces swirled out of the void, men and women, faces twisted in expressions caught between rage and sadness. Mouths moved, silent, imploring him. He reached out, compelled to touch, to understand. As his fingers brushed the dream-touched air, a jolt of clarity coursed through him. These were the victims of the harvestmen, and they cried out for justice. Cal awoke, gasping, his skin clammy with sweat. The revelation pulsed within him, a call to action that eclipsed all else. He realized, perhaps naively, that he had not been brought to Crestwood by chance, but by the echoes of the past seeking to right a wrong. Compelled by an inexplicable urgency, Cal delved into the history of the harvestmen with a fervor he hadn't known he possessed. At the local library, he unearthed dusty records and yellowed newspaper clippings. Patterns emerged, woven with threads of malice. Crestwood's seemingly idyllic facade had hidden whispered legends of a killer who vanished, leaving his community broken and adrift. The victims had been seemingly random, yet there was an underlying connection in their solitude, each one an outsider, much like Cal himself. His investigation led him to the old cemetery on Crestwood's edge, a somber site, neglected and silent. There he discovered their graves, marked by simple headstones. Each stone, pocked and worn by time, bore the weight of forgotten sorrow. One grave, however, stood distinctly apart, unmarked and ill-tended, the earth above it unnaturally disturbed. Cal's heart pounded as he stood before it, realizing this wasn't merely a resting place, but a testament to the unanswered screams for justice. Here lay the last known victim, whose body had never been found. Guided by an inexplicable force, Cal returned to the forest as the sun surrendered to the embrace of night. Moonlight filtered through the branches, painting the undergrowth in a spectral glow. The stone circle awaited him, charged with a latent energy that hummed under his skin, resonating with the rhythmic cadence of a forgotten testament. Kneeling before the stones, Cal placed his hands on their unyielding surface, whispering a promise to the woven silence. As if in response, the ground trembled beneath his touch, a ripple of acknowledgement passing through the air. Suddenly, a voice rose, clear yet entwined with the ancient rustle of leaves, speaking directly to him, though from beyond. "You've awakened us, and thus are bound. For justice shall be our guide, and through you, retribution will find its mark." The shadows thickened, coalescing into the form of the harvestman, a specter of lingering malevolence, stitched together from twilight's fabric. Yet Cal understood instinctively that this was not the true killer, but a construct, a manifestation engineered by the awakened spirits as gatherers of their lost authority. Guided by knowledge beyond his understanding, Cal channeled his collective resolve, confronting the embodiment of dread with nothing more but the truths he had uncovered. Each word spoken aloud became a litany, resonating within the hallowed space, forcing the harvestman to confront the memories steadfast in stone, the relentless cries for restitution that persisted through silence. The air quivered, saturated with expectancy, as shadows twisted and contorted, spilling their darkness back into the earth from which they sprung. Emancipated cries of joy, scarcely audible, sang into the forest, and with a final shudder, dawn's first light pierced the clearing, vanquishing the specter that once dwelt there. As the first rays of warmth stole across his skin, Cal came to truly grasp his role in the unfolding saga. The spirits of the dead had found peace, and with it, a form of closure. They had claimed their vengeance through him, a channel through which agony had been transcended by unwavering truth. Returning to his cabin, Cal sat before his desk, pen poised over paper. Through ink and sweat, he transcribed his journey. Not merely a story, but a testament and a record, a solemn tribute to Crestwood's liberation. He wrote of how a town haunted by its past used the voice of an unwitting emissary to reclaim its peace. The harvestman was no more. And as for Cal, he realized that the genuine tale lay not in the horror of bygone days, but in the unyielding resolve of a community to overcome trauma. It was a narrative of endurance and the indomitable spirit of those who withstood it, an echo of hope for all who found themselves lost within the shadows.
The lunar lander, Artemis 3, descended gracefully, its thrusters delicately balancing the spacecraft as centuries of cosmic dust billowed into the void. This mission was to be a triumph, a testament to humanity's unyielding spirit, set to establish our first permanent outpost on the moon. But as the lander's legs touched the alien soil, Lieutenant Commander Ethan Walsh already sensed an ominous undercurrent that wouldn't be dispelled by the lunar dawn. Disaster struck before the landing. A ferocious solar flare unleashed a barrage of radiation that overwhelmed the lander's systems, leaving it crippled. The crew, the competent and brave Commander Lee, Specialists Grant and O'Neill, and Dr. Rivera, succumbed to the flare's wrath, their lives extinguished by the invisible cosmic storm. Ethan survived by sheer providence, ensconced in an isolated module meant to shield fragile electronics from the sun's ire. Seated in the imposing silence post-landing, Ethan felt the confines of Artemis 3 closing in around him. The silence was palpable, a living entity that pressed down upon him. Ethan inhaled deeply through the helmet's life support system, grounding himself with a routine born of both necessity and habit, before casting his gaze through the visor's glass to the endless gray of lunar dust and shadows. The sea of tranquility stretched out before him, seemingly dormant but inherently deceptive in its namesake. With communications severed by solar rage, Ethan's immediate priority was to secure the lunar repeater on a ridge 2 kilometers away. Without that link to the orbiting command vessel, he was alone, another soul lost in the void, suffocated by the foreboding moon. Exiting the lander, Ethan's suited form appeared tiny and fragile against the vast moonescape. He was a solitary figure, alone but not entirely solitary, shadows extended in bizarre ways, flickering with unsettling vitality. He progressed across the regolith, each step imbued with gravity unfamiliar to him, exacerbated by a nagging feeling that he was not alone. The tranquility was a deceptive guise, hiding something sinister, lurking just within the shadow's embrace. Determined, Ethan advanced carefully over the lunar terrain, each step raising tiny clouds of moondust that sparkled under the relentless sun. With each stride, he drew closer to the repeater, yet the atmosphere became fraught with tension. It was as though an invisible force field wrapped around him, constricting tighter as he neared his goal. He paused, the sensation of being observed intensifying. Spectral shapes danced at the edge of perception, swirling in the periphery. Were these manifestations of isolation, products of a mind strained by the weight of solitude and survival, or had he stumbled upon a mystery, profound and impenetrable, hidden in the moon's sterile wastes? Near the repeater, Ethan's vision twisted again, violently. Shadows detached from the grey moon's surface, moving not with the predictable cadence of celestial rotations, but of their own volition. They fluttered around him, whispering, broadcasting frequencies incoherent and unsettling, slipping through his consciousness like thousands of voices barely heard. "Stay focused," Ethan muttered, his voice muffled in the helmet's confines. Repeating the mission motto over and over, he clung to his purpose like a lifeline. But the shadows weaved their narrative, circling around him with the insidious tactility of a shared mental invasion. They probed deeper, seeking knowledge buried within him, their alien consciousness unfurling in an intimacy he had never imagined. Images flared before Ethan's eyes, a child's carefree laughter on Earth, the camaraderie shared with his fallen comrades, these cherished fragments resonated within his mind, manipulated and echoed back at him by the shadows, picking apart the threads of humanity. They seemed to want comprehension, assimilation perhaps, or identification in the unknowable void of space. Instinctively, Ethan resisted. He constructed mental barriers formed from resolve and memory to stave off their grasp. His mind clung fiercely to the familiar. Faces of loved ones, the purpose of his mission, snatches of life on Earth. Forging a barrier against this intimate attack from the long shadows. Glimpsing the repeater, his beacon of hope, Ethan collapsed to his knees, his internal resources fracturing under the strain. The shadows flickered with heightened intensity, encroaching further, until the terrestrial technology's soft hum sliced through their spectral cohesion. Desperate, he detangled the repeater lines and re-established the connection, recalibrating communion with the distant orbit. Contact re-established, the repeater's oscillation pulsed across the moondust, severing the creature's hold. They shrank back, muttering wafts of shadow-dissolved tension prolonged no further, forlorn, outside of the sealed human network. As they shrank away, Ethan kneeled, the barren regolith providing precious calm beneath his suit. Breath slowing, his body ached from exertion, a mix of sparse relief and disbelief cocooning around him. He was alone again, possibly saved in body if not mind. But for how long, he wondered, haunted by an inkling that he wasn't truly alone in this alien land. Rising slowly from the moondust, Ethan regained limited balance on an unsteady surface. The repeater's reassuring hum vibrated through the vacuum, a stark note of humanity's presence on this distant, hostile body. The communication link restored a connection with orbiting command, locked him back into the threads of earthbound assurance. Yet what they could know, what he could say, would omit the shadows. The immediate aftermath of technological salvation left but a fleeting memory of the spiritual duress he'd faced. How could anyone, back on Earth, comprehend that the shadows were alive, grasping for understanding and merging with him? It was an encounter probably dismissed as the radiation-induced madness of an isolated mind. Reports were transmitted back to Earth, simplified to basic data and incident logs. Ethan remained pragmatic and terse, delineating the technical failures, losses, and eventual repairs without indulging the enigma he'd faced. Humanity would mark it as a tragedy turned technical success, another footnote on mankind's lunar ledger. But within him, shadowed remnants lingered, not reshaping his focus, but curbing the souls of ambition. For now, leaving them unvoiced, tethered them inside the cosmic truth. He knew they would haunt him forever, whispers embedded in the aftermath of his solitary lunar vigil. He'd faced what hung beyond the grasp of empirical understanding, their formless dance a silent echo on the shores of torrential possibilities. Time became fluid aboard the rescue craft, the return to Earth marked by a meditative resignation. He was accompanied by the sightless eyes of his thoughts, elements of his endurance held close against scrutiny and the certainty of disbelief. Days and nights blurred into silent contemplation, devoid of the camaraderie and teamwork that had once been the cornerstone of every successful mission. Landing marked another turning point. The gravity of Earth hooked his weary frame, pulling him into the familiar embrace of home. Despite the personal gravity of unknown truths and shadows lived, but no longer visible. Ceremonies were held, honors bestowed upon the fallen, while words of bravery marked Ethan's steady resilience in escaping a moon infested in absurdity. None knew or could be told of the shadows that had endured alongside him. Even now, reflected they gazed, impressed in his soul. As days moved into weeks, Ethan adapted to life on Earth, yet found solace only in solitude, seeking companionship of stars visible atop earthly skies. When night fell cold and promising, he stared into infinity, searching for truth within each gleaming point of light, knowing the shadows lingered somewhere out there behind the lush cloak of cosmic night. His dreams were punctuated by haunting shades, flashes of light that came less frequently, yet each an imprinted echo born from his time in void's embrace. He accepted, if only to himself, that his bond with the quiet lunar surface, its sentient shadows, could not be severed by distance or time. Thus did Ethan become a guardian of unknowable verity, a sentinel of his own silence and the shadow's dancing edge. His voice, however, spoke only of technical fears, devoid of spectral awareness. Humanity relentlessly ventured again, guided by unyielding curiosity, eternally blind to the moon's shadowy inhabitants. Journalists forewent another story, as Ethan's lips remained sealed, ignorance tributary to mystery, a trusted, valiant facade shielding Ethan's knowledge under the chaste veneer of an explorer who'd returned from darkness unscathed. But continually, alongside physical reality and the moon's familiar sheen from far below, shadows watched, abiding unspoken affinity tied between sentinel and seer, destined to forever guide each hallowed breath back through the touch of eternity. Ethan returned a survivor, the sacred keeper of untold secrets, a guardian against darkness that peer beyond the edges of starlit touch. He snugly harbored light in celestial shadow, where cosmic echoes kept silent referendums upon those hushed neath eternal night.
Deep within the Appalachian Mountains, where mist clings to the ground and seems to exhale through the dense thickets of pine, a whisper of a legend roams from town to town. The tale of the Terrazzo Brothers Circus. Unlike other circuses with their kaleidoscope of lights and vibrant banners, Terrazzo's was an unfolding legend with a shadowy reputation and an allure that both repulsed and intrigued. For Eleanor Reeves, standing outside the faded marquee advertising the most spectacular show on Earth, the circus represented not wonder or excitement, but a profound sense of dread. Clowns, the root of that fear lay in painted faces and exaggerated grins capable of hiding real horror. When circumstances forced her to become part of the caravan's curious ensemble, she felt the layers of terror she'd buried deep within begin to resurface. Her life had spiraled after losing her only living relative, an aunt whose unexpected passing left her with nothing but debts and an old suitcase filled with mementos and half-read letters. With no job prospects and creditors looming, Eleanor was desperate. Her plight caught the eye of Marco Terrazzo, the enigmatic ringleader of the travelling circus, who promised escape and opportunity for those willing to join his troupe. The alluring promise of food, lodging, and the vague notion that she might find something of value amidst the frenetic world of itinerant performers drew Eleanor in. Yet she couldn't shake the disquiet that amplified tenfold when she joined their caravan. Her first night was one of anxious insomnia, her tiny cot beneath the tent's canvas roof feeling more like a trap. The sound of her fellow performers mingled through the thin barrier, separating her from the night, a chorus of practiced routines and laughter with an underlying melancholy. Eleanor quickly realized how much she didn't understand. Hushed warnings exchanged in shadows and rehearsals drowned out by an unnerving tension that echoed her fears more loudly than applause ever could. Days bled into nights, and the circus held more secrets than she had imagined. Under its celebrations simmered a pervasive gloom threaded through the laughter, like a malignant vine. And always it felt connected somehow to the clowns. Lucien, their leader, with his eternally twisted smile and unsettling gaze, spoke to her only briefly, his words more insinuation than actual communication. The clowns were not like others she had encountered. These were figures that made her recoil as if her instincts warned of their wrongness. Something ancient seemed to whisper beneath the surface. "You'll get your sea legs soon enough," coaxed Beatrix, an aerialist with fiery hair and a knowing grin that hinted at secrets. "But beware the tents they weave. Lucian's clowns have a knack for weaving things too tightly." Pressed to elaborate, Beatrix only shrugged Eleanor's questions away, leaving her frustration to fester. Eleanor was torn between fleeing and the pull of mysteries she found herself entwining with. It was beneath the canopy of a starless night that the first true inkling of the circus's surreal nature crept into focus. Exhausted from a day of menial labour, carrying jugs of water, checking rigging, and maintaining caravans, Eleanor stumbled upon a spectacle beneath the darkened tent spire. The main tent was supposedly empty, yet, peering through a tear in the fabric, she witnessed Lucian and his clowns at a private rehearsal, a macabre dance of shadows and laughter. Their painted faces flickered in the dim lamplight, moving in eerie synchronicity as if guided by something beyond the immediate, tendrils of time and intent not meant for understanding. Lucian caught her gaze, his eyes glinting a question that required no verbal answer. The clowns broke formation, and Eleanor skittered away, breathless, a cold unease gripping her as she fled into the night. Sleep was elusive, her thoughts a whirlpool of questions, her fear of clowns transformed into something deeper. Rumours whispered among carnies, furtive and palpable. Fear prickled every nerve when she crossed paths with them. Gerald, an aging juggler, noted her distress and offered words of encouragement like a mentor. "Be careful round here," he advised one evening, adjusting the worn cap perched on his greying hair. "Things have gone missing before, and so have people." His tone was gentle, yet his words struck Eleanor. Answers came haltingly, tales that sounded more like rumours, yet she believed them. She learned of disappearances swept aside by murmurs about those who vanished without trace. Her nights became a dizzying routine of unease. The fog that nestled in every corner of the circus seeped into her dreams and thoughts. And always, she was drawn back to the clown's performance, compelled to watch their acts, tinged with something far beyond mere performance. Beneath the charade of exaggerated gestures and slapstick routines lay a sinister bond, a strange and unsettling connection running deeper than mere performance. To Eleanor, their laughter felt hollow, their antics masking a darkness that seeped like ink into the fabric of the circus. Lucian's penetrating gaze was unsettling, his eyes hinting at a reality she was unwilling to confront. One particularly oppressive night, Eleanor lay restless in her cot as her mind swirled with nightmares. She awoke heart-pounding, driven by a determination to uncover the mysteries intertwined with her fears. She found herself at Lucian's quarters, compelled to enter and unveil the hidden truths. Within his space, a museum of curiosities awaited. Costumes hung limply, masks frozen in mirth. They seemed to watch her. Paranoia crawled up her spine as she thought of the eyes behind each mask, mocking her intrusion. Among the disarray, a document caught her eye. Unfolded, it released a metallic scent, evoking past and present. Her fingers traced archaic script, detailing an understanding far beyond ordinary performance. A pact with something ancient and powerful. The realization unsettled her. As she read, a sound, more felt than heard, filled the room. She turned sharply, expecting someone behind her, but met only the mask's gazes. A heavy presence lingered, footsteps sounded outside, jolting her to awareness. Driven by urgency, Eleanor refolded the document, fled into the misty fields, her heartbeat echoing fear. In her tent, Eleanor clutched the papers. Lucian's grasp was clear, extending beyond captivating shows through secrecy enforced by coercion. But escape wasn't her only hope. a deeper purpose emerged. Compelled by understanding, she saw staying as a path to face these truths. The following days grew tense. Her resolve now pulsed with a desire to expose the spectacle's grim heart. Though weighted by childhood fear, the pull toward confronting Lucien was undeniable. Festival night dawned cool, the air electric with excitement. Eleanor met Beatrix backstage, their shared defiance kindling a bond through unspoken endurance. Gerald offered support, clutching a charm as a protective talisman. As showtime approached, Eleanor felt drawn toward the Big Top's ring. Lucien commanded the stage with his invocation. Eleanor emerged from shadows into harsh lights, papers as a tangible promise to unveil truths. Lucien beckoned, offering inclusion, a construct within their deranged pageantry. Eleanor, shoulders set, stepped forward unafraid. Here at last was her confrontation, an orchestra of cruelty faced with defiance. The clowns surrounded her. Eleanor unfurled the document, spoke aloud, shaking the illusions. The jeering smiles sought to drown her senses, yet each word pierced the reverie they'd woven. Gerald and Beatrix, standing by, fortified her with silent support. Lucian's grip began fracturing, the circus spirit dissipating within their truth's bright recognition, the beaten pact collapsing at her conviction. Dawn surged through the tent, clowns reduced to silhouettes, spectres exposed by rival light. Eleanor exhaled, seeing the patron's world crumble into displaced vision. Freed, she stepped into the day's freshness, sunlight warm as tents retreated like ghosted dreams. A scattering crowd parted, the carnival's essence lost, found again as mere theatre recounting past lives bound by illusion. Lucian's domain receded, sown with dust. Embracing Gerald and Beatrix, Eleanor felt warmth through newfound ties, not haunted, but woven with family. Her path lay beyond this place. Life continued along horizons untethered by fear. As the circus departed, once fearsome masquerades turned to distant echoes redeemed. Freed from shadows, having embraced the light, Eleanor smiled. She'd become the author of a new tomorrow, untethered and whole beneath an open sky.
The town of Eldridge Hollow had always been quiet, nestled among rolling hills and dense woodlands. Its charm lay in its simplicity, a place where everyone knew each other, where the pace of life was gentle, and nature still held a commanding presence. But as summer waned and autumn's crisp breath began to paint the leaves gold and crimson, an unease spread among the townsfolk like a simmering fog. The first whispers started on the outskirts. Farmers complained of increased spider activity around barns and fields. Webs woven in intricate patterns hung thickly from trees, barns, and even farm equipment. At first, it was dismissed as nothing more than a seasonal surge. But the truth was far more insidious, something darker, lurking beneath the quiet exterior of village life. Jeannie Wilkes, Eldridge Hollow's unofficial chronicler of happenings, documented the emergence with an artist's eye. Her grandfather, perched on the porch, pipe in hand, passing down tales of nature's power with the gravity of myths. Among them was the legend of the spider tide, a natural anomaly said to blanket the land with arachnids on rare occasions. Jeannie, fascinated yet skeptical, penned her observations eagerly, soon realizing that this was not a quaint legend. It was an unfolding reality. The unease shifted to alarm when Anders, the owner of the local diner, reported that every crevice and corner of his establishment was brimming with life. He recounted how legions of spiders spun webs with fevered haste, coating tables and chairs as if guided by an unseen command. Customers recoiled in horror as the spiders stubbornly held their ground, their purpose seemingly inexplicable. On the surface, life in Eldridge Hollow attempted to proceed as normal. The mayor, a portly man with an aversion to alarmism, dismissed growing concerns with assurances that nature simply had its peculiar cycles, but his words rang hollow as the birthing populace of eight-legged creatures swarmed uninvited throughout the town. In the shadows, theories bloomed. Whispers of the spider tide transformed from obscurity into dreaded acceptance. Storefronts remained closed longer each day, fearful patrons scattering indoors with every new report. The spiders, their numbers now uncountable, threaded through the town en masse as though joining a silent, inexorable march. Jeannie embarked on her own investigation, gathering evidence in every form. She noted the creatures' behavior, how they congregated in specific areas, the towering church steeple, where spiders descended in silk cascades, and the forgotten ruins on the town's perimeter, wrapped in webbed shrouds. According to local rumor, an eldritch force innelled the spider tide, acting as a harbinger of something yet more dreadful. A theory that resonated disturbingly as Jeannie noticed the rising unease in the arachnid army around them. Faces once familiar grew shadowed by fear, suspicion, threatening to fracture the bond of kinship among the villagers. Spider populations continued to swell, defying logic and explanation. Jeannie reviewed her grandfather's stories with fresh eyes, seeking wisdom amid ancestral truths. Each narrative revealed tiny truths until one stark fact gleamed in urgent understanding. Eldridge Hollow stood at the heart of the anomaly, central to the convergence now underway. The growing twilight brought only chaos. Eldridge Hollow seemed cursed, overrun by a malign intelligence animating the arachnid masses. It was not simply nature at play, manipulating currents in an unsettling dance. There was a reason, one hidden beneath layers of superstition and local lore. Townsfolk barricaded windows and doors, ritualistically burning candles and reciting prayers learned in childhood. But Jeannie refused to submit to these simplistic coping mechanisms. Instead, she penned a plea for help, casting her words beyond Eldridge Hollow in hopes that someone, an expert or a believer, would regard their plight with legitimacy. As panic set in, events turned violent. A misunderstanding between two neighbors escalated as nerves frayed to the breaking point. The cacophony of fracture mirrored the spiraling frenzy within the web-strewn domain. That night, Jeannie experienced a new horror. Dreams violated by shadows of creeping legs and eyes that spun art in silk woven from starlit ether. Driven by restless urgency, she rose before dawn, determined to learn the spider tide's origin. With notebook in hand and a lantern lighting the way, she ventured into the woodlands, tracing paths etched into memory from childhood adventures. The weight of discovery burdened her steps until she stood at the threshold, her eyes cast on the ruins enveloped in thread-like sinew. As she stepped into the sepulchre of shadow and moon's glow, something whispered through the web-strewn trees, an ancestral voice, calling with gravity's own longing. Jeannie felt the space between one world and the next in its breath, the place where shadow was substance and time whispered memory. Yet amid this embrace, a reality unbidden unfolded before her eyes, a pull toward an unsettling truth that reached beyond reason's clutch. Morning broke over Eldridge Hollow, painting a deceptive scene of stillness. Jeannie's return from the ruins brought with it an invisible thread of anxiety, wound deep within her consciousness. Though heartened by the town's half-hearted camaraderie, an understanding lay dormant, a secret known but concealed by fear of acknowledgement. She immersed herself in books, retrieved from the dusty records of Eldridge Hollow's library, tomes detailing local folklore, natural anomalies, and meteorological phenomena. As Jeannie delved into the pages, Revelation took form amid the inked histories. Each entry converged on a central mystery, a tale chronicled in fragments and whispers, woven into the geographical heart of the town. But there was more. Her own intuition unveiled a secret desire enacted by hands unseen. A cryptic equilibrium held the town in the shadow's balance, orchestrating life's subtle symphony. In the web-bound reaches of her consciousness, Jeannie discerned a pattern connecting to the spider tide, a destiny preordained by more than ancestral myths. The spider's presence was no random anomaly. It was a convergence heralded by energies magnetically aligning forces intangible and profound. The realization came with startling clarity. Eldridge Hollow, possessing its own magnetic pull that entwined both humanity and nature, an essence living deeper than merely roots and stone. Empowered by insight, Jeannie resolved to face the town with truth's brilliance unveiled. Her words reverberated within the town hall, casting discordant light amid the people gathered. "We are not victims," she declared, voice unwavering. "We stand at the center of a unique manifestation. The spider tide is not an omen, but a reflection, a mirror to our own unity and understanding." At first, dissent rippled through the audience, their minds shackled by fear. But her convictions resonated powerful bonds among those listening, slowly drawing together disconnected strands of thought. What seemed curse became an observance realized, the convergence of forms ushered by nature's cycles, seeking neither malice nor benevolence. A collective decision emerged. Eldridge Hollow would embrace this convergence, guided by the knowledge shared within. Understanding awakened acceptance, seeded within each soul by the energy coursing through the very heart of their home. Together, they transformed fear to understanding. The spiders no longer malevolent, but a symbol of nature's grandeur. And so, the webs were left to glisten undisturbed, a testament to the spider's genius. The townsfolk moved freely, weaving their daily lives alongside their eight-legged companions. As each generation matured, the spider tide continued its dance, a symbiotic embrace marking Eldridge Hollow, a pulse marking place and time unfurled. It was during this reconnection, under Twilight's forgiving veil, that Jeannie uncovered the twist in their shared narrative, one hidden in plain sight. Among the countless spiders, Jeannie noticed a glint, an otherworldly shimmer upon an intricate web, a remnant of a cosmic harvest beyond comprehension. Eldridge Hollow stood not as mere ground, but as a fulcrum, a crossroads resting at edges of unimagined dimensions. The convergence was not cyclical happenstance, but a phenomenon nurtured by elemental tides migrating through both human and arachnid form. The spider tide remained enigmatic, unswayed by titanic gratitudes or the scales of human reason, every cycle ever measured in quietude beyond ken. Yet there lay in symbiosis the glint of future, woven with endless adventure among worlds untold, where shadows held the allure of whispered light. The realization of their cosmic kinship within this communion offered enlightenment, a subtle magic born through understanding, ushering Eldridge Hollow into an eternal dance. It was as though webs spun between Eldridge Hollow and other realms, each thread whispering secrets only shared in darkened stillness. As Jeannie left the town hall, she gazed upon the hills above Eldridge Hollow. The wind wove its sinuous charm over the landscape, carrying webs from distant dawns to fringes unseen, woven in harmony across stars to elsewhere, guiding hearts of earthly kin.
The night air was thick with anticipation as the five friends gathered around the flickering campfire, its light casting eerie shadows across their faces. They had been planning this weekend getaway for months, a chance to escape the mundane routines of life and indulge in the thrill of adventure. Mia, the de facto leader of the group with her wild curls and even wilder ideas, had been the one to find the brochure. It was tucked inside the pages of an old library book. The Chamber of Shadows, a night you'll never forget, only one will survive. The others had laughed, assuming it was just some gimmicky haunted attraction trying to drum up business. But Mia had insisted. Come on! It'll be like one of those escape room challenges. Besides, how often do we get to do something completely terrifying? Her enthusiasm was contagious, and soon enough Mia, Jake, the stoic and steady athlete, Zara, ever skeptical but secretly a thrill-seeker, Lila, the gentle soul whose love for horror movies didn't quite match her nerves, and Ethan, the tech wizard who believed every experience was made better with a bit of digital documentation, piled into the car with sleeping bags and snacks. As the car's headlights penetrated the creeping fog, the group arrived at an imposing stone building looming against the midnight sky. The lantern-lit path leading to the entrance was bordered by gnarled trees that whispered in the cold breeze, setting an uneasy tone. The Chamber of Shadows, Zara read aloud from the sign above the entrance. Her voice trembled slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of the foreboding that lay ahead. Inside, the air was even colder, biting into their skin as a figure emerged from the shadows. Dressed in a long cloak, the stranger had a face obscured by the hood. Welcome, brave souls. You've chosen to embark on a journey like no other, the figure intoned, voice dripping with theatrics. Behind each door lies a test, a challenge of both the mind and spirit. You must work together or fall to the shadows. Remember, only one will survive. Ethan smirked, his phone ready to capture their reactions. Sounds like a good deal for a video, he whispered to Mia, who rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. The others chuckled nervously, a tension-laden camaraderie binding them as they stepped forward. The first chamber was decorated in an eerie replica of a Victorian parlour, complete with creaking wooden floors and dusty, moth-eaten drapes. A fireplace roared to life unexpectedly, illuminating a letter splayed open on a small table. Solve the riddle to proceed, or forever be trapped by greed. Oh, great. A puzzle to start off with. Classic, Jake muttered, scanning the room for clues. The others fanned out, searching through forgotten knickknacks and cobweb-covered furniture. It was Lila who discovered the clue nestled inside an ornate clock, a series of numbers etched in brass, paired with cryptic symbols. After several minutes of frantic deduction and rising panic, Zara's quick wit deciphered the riddle. Each number matches the letters of the alphabet. Combine them to spell trust. With a click, a hidden door swung open, revealing a staircase spiraling into darkness. One by one they descended, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the oppressive silence that seemed to swallow their voices. The second chamber was different, walls lined with mirrors that distorted their reflections into grotesque creatures. Their task was simple, yet sinister. Find the key hidden in the reflections. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, attempted to find the logical angle to view the key. But the more they searched, the more the reflections began to whisper, sowing seeds of distrust among them. It's messing with our heads, Ethan said, frustration tightening his voice. The mirrors are playing tricks. It was Mia who finally figured it out. Look past the shadows, she murmured, repeating what she had noticed one reflection chanting. Shifting her perception, she found the key hovering just out of sight, an illusion waiting to be grasped. The door creaked open, but the tension lingered in the air like a phantom as they entered the third chamber. This time the room was stark and bare, save for a single chair and a gramophone whose needle sat expectantly on a record. With a shrug, Ethan set it to play and a haunting lullaby filled the air. Yet it was not the music that seized their attention, but the words whispered beneath the melody. One name, repeated over and over. Mia's. Why me? Mia whispered, fear threading her voice. The shadows have chosen, Jake said cryptically, eyes sworn to seriousness he rarely showed. It's supposed to be you. With no further clues, the chamber became a cold chamber of decision. Mia, trembling but resolute, sat in the chair. Whatever it is, I have to face it. Her friends surrounded her, their support wordless as the shadows inched forward like living smoke tendrils to envelop Mia. She gasped, a sharp intake of breath as if plunged into ice water, before disappearing from their view. Shocked silence loomed, followed by chaos. No, 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 this isn't part of the game, Lila cried, her voice breaking. Zara grasped her shoulder, trying to comfort with a touch that belied her own rising terror. But before panic could take more root, the shadows receded, leaving Mia standing unharmed, albeit visibly shaken, as the whispers faded into nothingness. Let's just keep going, she urged, determined to not linger in the past. With her voice as their anchor, they pressed on. The corridors twisted, disorienting them until they arrived in the next chamber, greeted by a macabre tableau, a feast laid out on an ancient wooden table, surrounded by empty chairs. A note stained with something dark and unidentifiable warned, "Eat or be eaten. Choose wisely." None of them dared move, all eyes on the feast as if it were an enemy laying in wait. Finally, driven by hunger and resolve, Jake approached. "It's another trick," he said, confidence masking doubt. "It has to be." The unveiling task was undertaken cautiously. Each scrutinized food item unveiled clues hidden beneath dishes. It was Lila who discovered the final puzzle, a message baked beneath the icing of an untouched cake. Change your fate. Slivers of courage reached the surface. Jake, crafting a plan with Zara's analytical mind, reasoned that this was a metaphor, an opportunity to remake choices they'd assumed to be out of their control. As one, they overturned their feast, revealing a blood-red knife inscribed with the word "sacrifice" beneath the table. It immediately triggered a shift, a portal opening beside them, the air shimmering like a mirage. The final chamber awaited, a cavernous hall filled with statues lining the walls, each an intricately detailed depiction of fear personified. The murals on the ceilings told stories of struggles and betrayals, the shadowed corners teeming with echoes of forgotten screams. The cloaked figure from their beginning reappeared, the cowl lowered to reveal a face of shifting forms. It spoke, voice a chilling reminder of the journey walked. The one who will survive must face their darkest fear. The friends exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing among them. They'd started this together and they'd face this too as one. But as the shadows encroached, they instinctively stepped back, alone in the face of destiny. One by one, the fears materialized from the depths of their psyche. Jake's fear of failure shadowed him in the form of twisted, disappointed reflections. Lila, ever afraid of being alone, watched as her friends slowly disappeared to leave her in chilling solitude. Ethan's pixelated world blurred, trapping him in a virtual labyrinth with no exit, terrified of a reality he couldn't escape. Zara confronted her heritage of skepticism, shadows of doubt estranging her from herself, questioning every action until paralyzed. And Mia, the leader, was thrust into a shadow version of herself, the darkness coursing through her veins, echoing silence he'd always feared might consume her, the fear of losing control becoming the monster hidden in expectation. Yet amid the nightmare, realization bloomed. Nothing changed unless they changed it. Mia was the first to fight back, screaming against the shadows clutching her throat, banishing her doubts by defiantly stepping beyond their reach. The others followed. Jake faced his reflections with confidence. Lila envisioned hope, recognizing her bonds tethered beyond sight. Ethan focused his mind, coding reality until he found a flaw. Zara relinquished doubt, embracing possibility, allowing freedom to flower. The cracks formed in the chamber of shadows as determination superseded fear. The cloaked figure shuddered, unraveling until nothing more than empty fabric fell to the floor as each friend defied fate and banished their spectres. Light exploded through the chamber, burning away lingering darkness and revealing a simple wooden door, unmistakably the exit. Emerging into the world, dawn pinked the horizon, everything near lit with the golden glow of triumph. They were together and alive, resilient in friendship, armed with knowledge of their fears, and stronger for it. They hugged, laughter breaking the stillness, binding them, having faced shadows both literal and figurative, returning from the chamber of shadows more alive than before. The promise of only one surviving echoed, true yet untrue. For while they'd entered fractured by fear, they'd emerged, each reborn. Only one of their truest selves had survived.
The rolling hills of Ireland, a verdant expanse speckled with the hues of heather and gorse, unfolded beneath the hazy autumn sky. A narrow road wound its way through this patchwork, leading a minibus towards its destination, Dunfane Castle, a stone sentinel that loomed imposingly atop a rugged hill. A group of eager tourists peered from the windows, eyes wide with anticipation and a hint of superstition fostered by tales of Ireland's supernatural. Guiding the tour was Connor, a young local with an affable demeanor and an encyclopedic knowledge of Gaelic lore. As the minibus crested the hill, revealing the castle's battlements silhouetted against the sunset, Connor began recounting its storied history. "Welcome to Dunfane Castle," he intoned, his voice imbued with theatrical charm. It stood the test of time through battles and betrayals, a testament to the era when chiefs and clans ruled these lands. The tourists listened enthralled, imagining shadows of past nobility treading those ancient stones. Among them, Isabella and Jake, a couple celebrating their recent engagement, felt the castle's aura nesting deeply within their romantic reverie. The allure of Dunfane's mystical charm, whispered through generations, enhanced their anticipation. As night descended, they reached the castle, enveloped by heavy clouds obscuring the crescent moon. The group disembarked and gathered their belongings, their footsteps hushed by the gravel path leading to the entrance. Connor unlocked the tall, iron-bound doors with practiced ease, welcoming them into the somber embrace of the castle's great hall. The interior brimmed with relics. Faded banners hung beside a grand fireplace. Dust motes danced in the golden light cast by flickering lanterns. Whispers of antiquity permeated the air. It was as if the stones themselves echoed distant mysteries. Despite its seasoned grandeur, an uncertainty tinged the air, ticking faintly against the smoldering hearth. Connor directed them through a hurried exploration, painting pictures of courtly intrigue with his words. The charmed group was shown spiral staircases that wound up into drafty towers, echo-laden corridors, and portraits of long-past occupants, faces trapped in regal stares that sometimes felt uncannily alive. Most importantly, Connor whispered conspiratorially, halting at a doorway leading to the depths below, is the legend of the vault, hidden somewhere within these stone walls, a long-lost treasury of the chieftain, cursed and abandoned with his lineage. The night crept forward, wrapping the castle in its inky embrace. The group retired to their rooms eagerly, though piqued curiosity held Isabella awake. Wandering the torch-lit halls, she marveled at how the stones whispered stories of their own, age-old tales of ambition, betrayal, and loss as seen through conjured eyes. She found herself drawn toward a specific chamber, neglected and shadowed, featuring a portrait, different from the rest. The painted eyes followed with unnerving accuracy, a glint hinting at secrets long buried. Beneath this gaze, Isabella sensed an expansion of the narrative, one distinctly guided by the undercurrent of unsatisfied hunger. Dreaming of hidden troves and veiled histories, Isabella meandered back, but sleep remained elusive. A chill invaded her mind, the eerie feeling of being watched intermingled with the castle's intense isolation, a guardian of truths unseen. The night settled deeply across Dunfane Castle as dreams traversed both the living and those unquiet. Suddenly the silence was shattered, an unnatural howling that rose from the depths, reverberating through stone and marrow alike, rousing remaining souls to wakefulness. Connor's voice, strained and hurried, called through the walls. "Come down, all of you. Something's stirring below." Gathering in confusion and haste, the group assembled, tremors of fear leapfrogging across their consciousness. The shadows thickened as Connor led them toward the source of the chilling wail emanating from the castle's underbelly, a passageway hidden behind brushing cobwebs, laden with secrets waiting to emerge. A sense of foreboding hung heavy. As they descended ancient steps into the cold bowels of the castle, lamps flickered wildly in an unseen draft sweeping through the corridors as spectral figures enfolded themselves from forgotten spaces. Crossing the bound threshold, they entered a sprawling chamber, its walls eerily suffused with a glow that revealed vaults and containers, long unopened. Collections of ancient wealth lay before them, tarnished and bound with chains steeped in ages past. Yet upon looking closer, they shuddered at the figures surrounding the room. Translucent shapes, the ghostly possessors of this forsaken place, stirred, eyes filled with insatiable greed fixed upon the treasure, every covetous nuance etched with a hunger that resonantly joined their unwavering stares. In self-twined terror reverberated through those gathered. Spectres' translucent forms hovered near the tarnished wealth their souls had long been bound to guard. Isabella felt a cold rush, a prickle of dread entwined with curiosity. Their ghostly visages, twisted in eternal greed and longing, were alarmingly articulate, each movement a dialogue between the living and the departed, calling silently for reclamation. Every ghostly eye seemed locked on the group, particularly Isabella, as if seeing her not merely as an intruder, but as a potential savior. She caught the eye of the chieftain, a hollow gaze that communicated a depth of lifetimes, lost yet beseeching redemption. Though she trembled under their scrutiny, Isabella felt clarity blossom within her, a realization born of whispers that tides had shifted, and she was the key. The air grew thick with anticipation, a hypnotic symphony pulling at Isabella's consciousness. The tourists clung together, eyes wide, breaths quickened by the spectral drama unfolding. Connor, though pale, held a fervent light in his eyes, daring to believe in folklore truth given flesh. Isabella, heart pounding, stepped forward, courage woven from desperation and resolve. Her voice echoed in the chamber, encompassing more strength than felt. "What do you desire? Why linger bound to this place?" The chieftain's visage flickered as he spoke, voice like rustling leaves, carrying the gravity of ancestral tones. "Greed chained us here, lust for gold consumed our end, leaving us guardians of echoes. You, daring to ask and listen, might help us find release, a key to unshackle eternal watch." His words sparked understanding, a cursed cycle driven by avarice, needing the selflessness of the living. The treasure pulsed with binding force. Isabella recalled tales of cursed wealth, binding coveters to doom, a lesson in folly. In that moment, Isabella's fear gave way to determination. She had to exchange avarice for redemption, aiding spirits in relinquishing wealth. "Is there a way to free you?" Isabella pressed, stepping closer, the group observing with bated breath. "Yes," the chieftain replied, spectral form stabilizing, hope cresting. "A pledge, manifest through goodwill and action, gifted to the living, restoring balance disrupted by greed, must be honored. Let the vault's wealth serve people, breathing life into community." Isabella nodded, feeling a righteous ceremony within her thoughts, emboldening spirit. She turned to fellow tourists, voice imbued with vulnerability and mission strength. We can help them move on. This treasure can aid the living, revitalize Eldridge, honor legacy, and write a new chapter. Whispers turned to nods as potential for newfound purpose was realized. Envisioning Eldridge rejuvenation, they accepted their extraordinary part in a tale. Initially skeptical, tourists saw doubts transform into resolve, transcending mere spectatorship. As they began cataloging and organizing treasure for town benefit, each gesture weighed in the spiritual realm. The chieftain's kin shimmered with each act, unraveling from greed, energy that once